So welcome to Scottish Murders. This is a different episode. Peter's going to be joining me, my husband, because we're actually travelling to Glasgow at this moment, where we're going to be recording with Peninsula TV regarding the murder of Darryl Fitch in 2015. They just got in touch and said that they were doing an episode where they'd be speaking to family members, detectives, forensic officers, and asked if I wanted to be part of it as well. So, of course, I said yes. It was a case I hadn't heard of, and I thought, why not tell you a bit about the case as I'm travelling up to tell them my thoughts on it. So here we go. So it's going to be slightly different. As I'm driving and I have an atrocious memory, Peter's going to be prompting me along the way. So we hope you find it interesting. And just to let you know that we will be putting this video of Peter and I travelling to Glasgow out on YouTube. So if you do want to watch for a change, then it'll be available on YouTube.
Yeah, you'll be able to see us both.
Okay, so let me tell you about the murder of Darryl Fitch. So at the time of Darryl's murder, spoiler alert, he was 43 years old. He was from Paisley, lived in Paisley, which is about, half an hour west?
Yeah, half an hour drive west of Glasgow, yeah.
West of Glasgow. He was living with his girlfriend, Mary. They'd been together about 7 years. And he was a student, wasn't he, Peter?
Yeah, he was a student studying computer networking.
After, obviously, our murder, Mary came out and said some lovely things about Darryl. So I'll just tell you a little few things.
She did. She said Darryl was a lovely man. He was popular. He loved his family and he would do anything for them. He didn't hate anyone or anything. He had a kind word for everybody. He loved life and he wouldn't pass anyone in the streets. He loved spending time with his family and we all loved him.
Yeah, so they were quite happy. They were just ticking on. He was a jolly man, and he had one of his best friends was William Cameron, and they were really close. They were like brothers. They never fell out. They never had quarrels. They just were good friends, really good friends. William would come and stay with Mary and Darryl when he would fall out with his girlfriend or his wife. So they just were really close. So on the 10th of July, 2015, William and Darryl decided that they were going to go camping and fishing in just outside Bridge of Weir, which is about...
Yes, about a 60-minute drive from where Darryl stayed in Paisley.
So on the morning, about 8:30, I think it was, Darryl said bye to Mary. She said to him, be good. And he said he would. And he was going to just maybe stay for the Friday night. But he might decide to stay on Saturday as well. Depends on the weather and such like. But he would give her a phone and let her know whether he was going to stay. So they went out there. They went to just outside Bridge of Weir. Now, they were just outside Bridge of Weir. Bridge of Weir is it's quite populated. It's a wee town, but they were on the outskirts of it. And Peter and I, we haven't been there, but we looked on a map, and let's set the picture. It's really isolated. There's no houses nearby. It's in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a field.
Yeah.
It's a single track road. It's very densely populated with wood, trees and foliage, and it's really overgrown. It's hard to see through. If somebody was camped on the other side of the trees, you wouldn't see them. It was really, there's a cattery filled.
Yeah, that's right. That's very much one of the few buildings that's nearby is a cattery, yeah.
But there was nothing else. Now, there was a national cycle path track there, though, that is well used. It's used by joggers, dog walkers, cyclists, those people, families that are there just to go down and, use the burn or the river that's there. So it wasn't completely isolated, but...
there'd be people coming by every so often.
Yeah, so that's where they decided to camp. However, by Monday the 13th of July, Mary hadn't heard from Darryl or William at all. Despite phoning, it was ringing, there was no answer, she was texting. And at 7:55 on Monday, Mary sent our final text, which read...
Yeah, she sent a message saying, I'm so worried about you. I love you so much. Please come home. XXX.
And she said that message, for her, it looked like it had been read.
Yeah, the message indicated it had been read.
So at that point, she didn't hear anything again from Darryl still. So at that point, she phoned the police to report him missing. At about 7:45, so 10 minutes prior to that, two fishermen had been going down. What was the place called? Locker Water. And two fishermen had been down there to fish, and they'd actually come across a body, which was Darryl's body, and he was lying in the river. It was a shallow river. It wasn't deep. It was just shallow. He was lying face down in the river, and he fully clothed with gashes on his head. So they called the police, and the police obviously came. So when they arrived, they found William lying on the bank, but don't know whether he was unconscious, but he was lying there, not saying anything. He had broken leg. He was thought to have been dehydrated, and he was hypothermic. So he was taken to hospital, and obviously Darryl's body was taken for a post-mortem. It wouldn't be until the early hours of Tuesday morning the police turned up at Mary's home, and they said that a body had been found. They thought it was Darryl, and she went to identify it, and it was Darryl. So William was, like I said, he was taken to hospital. His leg it was either broken, or was reported broken at one point, or severely wounded. Whatever was wrong with it, he needed to have an operation. He was in a really bad way. He needed to have an operation. So the police weren't able to talk to him until a few days after Darryl's body had been found. So they just had the scene to go by. So Darryl's body was found in the barn, in the river. William's body was found lying prone, but still alive. And that was all they had to go on. There was nothing else. They still had their cards, their wallets, their bank cards, they had cash. What they did find strange though was the fact that William actually had Darryl's mobile phone on him, and it was usable.
Yes, yeah, it's still usable.
And he had a key. He had on his keychain, his house key keychain. He actually had a whistle.
Yeah,
and neither had been used to summon help. So that was a bit of a question. But at that moment, they weren't able to speak to William to find out what had happened. Was somebody else involved? They didn't know whether the two of Darryl and William's assault, whatever had happened to them, was related. They didn't know anything. So they secured the scene. They gathered evidence. They did house-to-house inquiries. Obviously, there was no houses nearby, but they spoke to people in Bridge of Weir. They were appealing for anybody that had used the cycle track between the Friday and the Monday, or if they knew of anybody that had been camping in the area, or if they had been camping in the area, to come forward and just to establish a timeline of what had happened, of where they'd been, who they'd been with, and such like. So that's all they could do until they could speak to William. And the police did say that the response had been encouraging. But first off, there was a post-mortem carried out. Peter, tell us what was found in the post-mortem.
Yeah, the post-mortem revealed that Darryl had suffered 26 separate injuries. This included a black eye, a fractured eye socket, 5 broken ribs, 4 deep wounds to the back of his head, and a fractured neck bone. And cause of death was massive blood loss from the head injuries and drowning, and that he was a victim of a violent attack, and that his death was being treated as murder.
So on the 17th of July, the police were finally able to speak to William. And while it wasn't reported what he said, it was reported that he was cooperating with the police to help them try and establish what happened, how he'd sustained his injuries, and how Darryl had been killed. They also made another appeal at that time, again, just asking anybody to come forward who had been in the area, who knew anybody who had been in the area, just so, because there was still a lot of holes in the story, in the timeline, that they needed to fill. So about a month later, Mary, Darryl's girlfriend, she made an appeal as well. What did she say?
She said, so Mary's appeal saying she and Darryl's family were such pain and emotional distress, having lost Darryl and not knowing who had killed him, was causing even more heartache. She knew someone out there knew something, and she begged them to come forward. She said Darryl was a lovely man. He was popular. He loved his family. He would do anything for them. He didn't hate anyone or anything. He had a kind word for everybody. He loved life and wouldn't pass anyone in the streets. And she added, I'm asking for help to bring our family justice.
So the police are continuing to investigate. They said that they were focusing on 30 particular statements that they'd taken from people in Bridge of Weir. So 2 months later, there's an article about a 57-year-old man and his friend who had been walking along the cycle track not too far from where Darryl had been found, where they'd been approached by 3 men. They were chatting to her a little bit, but then the 3 men attacked this 57-year-old man, and basically they were robbed. Now this was reported to the police, but the police said that they didn't believe there was a connection with that robbery, that attack, and Darryl's murder.
Yes.
But it is a bit strange, isn't it? A bit of a coincidence that a robbery was going on, somebody was attacked close to where
somebody be attacked in the same area. Yeah, it was definitely a bit strange.
So the rest of that year is kind of quiet. Police are still investigating, they're still trying to put together the timeline, there's still holes in it. We still don't know what William has told the police about what happened. But the next thing that is reported is in January 2016, when it says that William is up in court on a charge of possessing a weapon.
Yeah, and
family now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, on the 12th of September 2015, William had been found in Bridge of Weir in possession of a standing knife, sitting at the water's edge, drinking cider. He had been arrested, not for the first time for having a weapon. In court, his defense lawyer revealed that it had been William who had been found with his friend Darryl, who'd been murdered, and he was suffering from PTSD and had been contemplating self-harm. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison, and despite what he was going through, more of which would come out later, as he had 3 previous convictions possessing a knife, it was felt that being sent to prison was the most appropriate sentence.
So just to say that it isn't until that point that we finally find out that William is named. Up until then, he hadn't actually been named. It was just said that it was a friend of Darryl.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that it came out. And then, out of the blue, on the 9th of March 2016, there's a BBC News article that said that William Cameron faced a murder charge. Can you tell us what the charge was? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, he'd been arrested and appeared at Paisley Sheriff Court again, this time charged with having repeatedly hit Darryl's head with a blunt instrument or having struck Darryl's head against an unspecified hard surface, and, by means unknown, having inflicted further injuries upon Darryl, where he sustained a severe head injury and drowned. 5 days later, 38-year-old William Cameron appeared at the High Court in Glasgow and was not only charged with having murdered Darryl, but also of stealing a mobile phone at Locker Water and of having cannabis resin, diazepam, temazepam, oxazepam in his possession. William pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him, and the trial date was set for September 2016.
So the trial begins on the 6th of September 2016, and we finally get to find out what William told the police in the hospital when they went to question him. So he told them that it was all a bit vague. He couldn't really remember what had happened. What he remembered was getting to their campsite, of trying to put the tent up, and he wasn't able to do a very good job, and that Darryl was laughing at him, and they were just having a laugh, and they were just enjoying themselves. He then remembers sitting round a campfire on stools and just having a laugh, having a drink, possibly the drugs as well, with Darryl, and just enjoying themselves. He then says he remembers hearing a noise behind him, and then there's pain as if he's hit over the head, and he falls forward. I don't know whether he blacks out or whether he gets up straight away, but he said the next thing he remembers hearing Darryl shouting, "Run, Willie," or "Go, Willie." And William gets up, he starts to scramble up the bank to get away, and he says he remembers turning round, and the last thing he saw was Darryl standing there in a fighting stance. Now, it's not mentioned whether there was anybody else there, whether he saw anybody else there, or what he saw. That was literally what he said. And then he just said he doesn't remember anything else. He don't know whether he blacked out. That's what he remembered. The next thing he remembers is waking up and there's no Darryl anywhere. And at this point, this is a bit, I found this a bit strange. He said he thought, oh, he's maybe just gone to get some chips or he's gone home, which I thought was weird. I mean, you've come together.
Yeah.
Okay, you might have gone to get chips. Maybe they were talking about going to get chips. That's fair enough. But why would he think he's just gone and left him? The Darryl was just gone home. That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you wouldn't leave your friend without saying something. So that is a bit strange.
That was odd. And he said he just doesn't remember. Now, we'll hear later on about what impact these drugs that were found in the system could have had on him in a minute. But if it's anything else that I've missed.
Yeah, because in court he actually said that Darryl was like a brother, that he always looked out for me, and they had a good relationship. He was a good guy. He'd also told police that he remembered falling from a ledge. Perhaps that's when he injured his leg. But other than that, he didn't seem to remember anything else, and he was pretty vague about what he remembered that weekend.
Okay, didn't really reveal too much, but right, okay. So next we hear from Darryl's girlfriend, Mary, and she says how she visited William in hospital after he'd had his operation. And she said that he'd been in a ward, which is with other people, and when he saw her, he said, got out of the bed, and he said, come on, we'll go and speak somewhere private. And she said when they got there, he said he was very sort of agitated and very anxious, and he said to her, have the police sent you? Have you come to find out what I know? Have the police sent you so you could go and tell them? And she was like, no. And he said, are you wearing a wire? And she said, no, I'm not wearing a wire. I'm here to see you, because they were friends. She knew him well as well. They were good friends. I'm here to see you. So anyway, she said that he did answer some of her questions, but it was, there wasn't a lot to say. But then when she challenged him on anything, he got upset. He got a bit agitated, and she said she found that a bit strange. So she actually did go to the police after that and say what he'd said. She just found it's not quite right. It's just a bit strange. So, she wasn't there for the police, but she did go afterwards. She visited him twice, one time at 1:30 and then again at 3:30. And each time she went back to the police and told them what he'd said.
It seemed like he thought he was going to be fitted up for Darryl's death. And she confirmed that was correct. And she also confirmed that after speaking to William, that she had indeed, like you said, told the police what he'd said to her.
Yeah. So she's saying he's anxious and agitated, but his solicitor had said to him as well, don't speak to anybody about your case. And that was, Mary also, when that was put to her, she did agree that he did tell her that I can't talk about this case.
Just means I might have went to the prior room just so he wanted to say something to her, didn't want to kind of leave her in the dark and tell her something of what he knew.
So you can see why, if he's saying his, he doesn't remember, his memory's not very good, doesn't really know what happened. His solicitor's saying don't talk about it, but Mary's asking him and he wants to. He could be anxious about it.
Yeah, he could have been worried about what he couldn't say, so it's not unreasonable. He would be anxious.
Yeah, exactly. So have I missed anything else about that?
Yes.
Right.
So it was also revealed that William had his bloods taken while in the hospital, and it showed he'd been 10 to 30 times the safe dosage of a drug which could have caused delirium and confusion in his bloodstream, along with diazepam and alcohol. God. The drug was called itazolam, which is not prescribed in the UK. Its side effects can include drowsiness, disorientation, confusion, delirium, and amnesia if too much is taken. These symptoms can also be exacerbated by alcohol and diazepam. It was actually mentioned that the drug could cause you to go into a mentally disturbed state and afterwards have no memory of what you've done.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, so him saying that he's forgotten what happened could be explained. That hell of a lot of drugs he had in his system.
Yes, because so his confusion about not remembering things could have been caused by the drugs that he had taken. It was actually stated by the pathologist that Darryl could have died from an accidental fall from a height into the water and then hit his head on the rocks. But it did say, while she couldn't exclude that, it would need to be the most unusual sequence of events. That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, God. Yeah, and maybe if William had the broken leg, maybe they both fell from this ledge that William.
Yeah, they both could have fallen from a ledge, and one of them unfortunately was injured more than the other.
It was a lot of damage. It would have had to have been a serious,
Yeah. I mean, he was even he's seriously hurt. He had to be in hospital for quite some time.
And Darryl as well. So then there was experts brought in. So what did they have to say?
Yeah, it was reported the mystery DNA. A male sample had been discovered on a belt that had been found near the scene where Darryl had been found. It had been entered into the DNA database, but no match had been found. While this could have been the DNA of the person who attacked Darryl, there was no way of knowing until that person was traced and interviewed. It was also revealed that a low level of mixed DNA of another person was found on William Cameron's Swiss Army knife, which had been found lying in water near where the pair had camped. It was actually said that more than 70 items had been recovered by the police from the site and had been examined. This included a can of iron brew, a Lucozade, or Ribena bottle, but these were never sent for testing, possibly as police felt they had been there for a long time. It was explained that forensics had spent time examining the area around the campsite. They were looking for blood spatter, but none was found. However, it was revealed, despite a witness apparently telling the police that they thought they'd heard an assault taking place in the arches of a viaduct a short distance from the campsite, forensics were never asked to examine this area at all, even for blood spatter. The forensic specialists confirmed they had not been told of this potential crime scene.
Yeah, that was quite bad that the police hadn't told them to go and, investigate this area, because that could have been part of it as well. Could have told could add more to the story, more to the picture. So, yeah, I don't know why they didn't do that.
Yeah, part of the story was potentially lost. I mean, who's to say there was any blood splatter there, but because they never checked, we'll never know.
Yeah.
It was also revealed that when William was found, he had Darryl's mobile phone. It was working, uncharged, and he'd even likely heard it ringing when Darryl's girlfriend had called, as well as the whistle being attached to his house keys, which he had on him, but neither had been used to summon help. The prosecutor said this shows William did not want to attract attention to himself in the immediate aftermath of Darryl's death.
Okay. I just find it strange that William was willing to sit there and wait for somebody to maybe find her.
He could have been in shock. He'd clearly had a bad fall. Something had happened. So he was hypothermic. He was, he'd had the drugs in the system. He probably wasn't thinking rationally. I mean, these are the kind of things you'd probably do even when you were attacked in any situation. I'd imagine you're not going to be thinking rationally. And he had all these additional things like the injury and the hypothermia to add to that. He just probably wasn't in a position to think to do those things, to draw that kind of attention. The hope was that somebody would come across him, which is exactly what did happen.
Yeah. Just the phone was ringing and he wasn't answering it, but I looked at the message and the message had been seen as to be read. You had to say about that though, didn't you?
Yeah, it's possible the phone was just left open. When a phone's open and unlocked, the message could have come in. The message appears doesn't mean that it was actually read by anyone. It just shows as being read. So that doesn't really indicate that he had the phone in his hand and the message is there and he's ignoring it. The phone might have been lying down somewhere. The message got received and that's why it showed that. And then later he put the phone in his pocket and never realized maybe that's why he missed the calls. Who's to say he certainly had the phone on him later, but maybe he didn't have it on him earlier.
Then you said he also maybe he did see the message, but then he passed out again.
Yeah, it could be that he had the message and just didn't have time to reply. When you've gone through that kind of experience, who's to know what you were able to do? You might just see the message and just, that was maybe the last thing he was able to do. The series discovered later. So him not responding to the message, not responding to the calls, that could be explained by various things that we'll never really know.
So the prosecutor basically said that there was no motive for another person being involved. William's story had constantly changed, apparently, and the prosecutor believed that it had changed to coincide with police being on to him, really believing that he had actually killed Darryl. It was later said that the story, it doesn't say what the stories were that I'd been saying. It did say that it was just getting more and more elaborate. It was just changing, getting more and more elaborate, and it was just lies. That was what the prosecutor was saying, and he'd been found out by the police in that twilight.
Yeah, exactly.
There was no chat. They didn't believe that the chances of it happening, a stranger just happening upon them, killing Darryl, but not taking anything, just didn't make sense.
Exactly. If you had that robbery of that 57-year-old that happened in the same area, if it had been a robbery, they would have taken something, they'd taken the phone or the bank cards or something. All of that was left. So it seemed really unlikely that was the case because of that.
The prosecutor was saying that it was William who had killed Darryl, whether that be in a drug-fueled wage or it wasn't aware he was doing it, but he did it.
Yeah, because he was confused about what he could remember. That maybe that's why his story kept changing, because he honestly couldn't remember the details. Some details maybe he did remember, and some he didn't, and that just made him seem more like an issue, less credible because of the changing of his story.
On the 4th of October, William Cameron was found guilty of murdering Darryl Fitch, but the judge saying that the jury had seen through his web of lies.
Darryl's girlfriend spoke after the trial, saying that she was in shock and disbelief that William had killed his best pal. She said the verdict had come as a tremendous shock and surprise to her. She thought William would have been the last person to be capable of murdering Darryl. She didn't believe it when Willie was arrested and charged, but after sitting through 4 weeks of a trial, she realised it had been William all along.
Yes, because she said there were 17 pieces of evidence presented at the trial, and she could, out of the 17, 16 of them, she could see two sides to the story. She could kind of explain it away how maybe William hadn't killed Darryl, but one piece of evidence sealed it for her, and she just knew straight away, you did it. You did this. And that was because William had said that he had fallen from a ledge and that he hadn't seen Darryl, and he showed the police where this ledge was, where it was, and then when he was showing a picture of this ledge, Darryl was at the bottom of the ledge. And it was at that point, William just lost it. He got really upset, really emotional. And it was at that point, Mary said, I know you did this. I can't think why. I'm not sure why. I don't know whether there's more to that wee story. That was what was reported. And that was what convinced her, finally, it sealed at your heart.
That's what made her realise it was him. Yeah, because she actually said they were the best of pals. They never argued. There was never a crossword between them. They were really close and always in each other's company. William had stayed with Darryl and Mary when William had fallen out with his partner. She said, "We did not seem like a violent person, and for a while, I thought there had to be a third person involved. He did not want to face up to what he had done, but was always cowardly and a bit of a storyteller."
Mary said that she just couldn't understand why you wouldn't have told the truth from the start.
Yeah, the lawyer had said it was because he'd fallen into a state of denial where he was just carrying on like nothing had happened.
So just as an aside, 2 months or less than 2 months before Darryl was murdered, Mary's sister was actually brutally murdered as well. She was stabbed 27 times. And it turned out that her killer was renting a property from her, and he thought she was going to evict her, so he killed her. But this same man, had actually served in the army with Mary, so they were close friends. So again, that's another betrayal. So not only was Darryl betrayed by his close friend, but Mary, who she knew this man, they'd worked together, they'd been together in the army, he killed her sister. And she was actually the mother of a 1-year-old as well.
It's a tragedy to have 2 friends of hers about to be killed, 2 other people in her life. It must be an absolute tragedy for her.
Yeah, definitely.
Mary said after the trial, "It's been a difficult time. I want to get my life back on track. I'll never forget Darryl, her boyfriend, or Grace, her sister. But it's time to concentrate on the future, to move on, to look forward and remain positive.
Days of William being sentenced and the trial ending, he was appealing the conviction, but it was quickly turned down, and there's been nothing else since. That was it.
Yeah, Mari's reported to have said in 2018 that she's done her best to put the tragic events of her past behind her by completing her postgraduate degree in marketing and is working 2 jobs at the moment, working in a shop and interning in an office, so she was keeping busy.
So that was the story of 42-year-old Darryl Fitch's murder. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll let you know when and how you can watch the episode by Peninsula Television about Darryl Fitch, where, like I said, you'll hear more information and from family members, and I just hope, fingers crossed, that I make the cut too.
Indeed, I'm looking forward to seeing you part of the programme.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of Scottish Murders.